A fateful encounter. The afternoon sun hung high in the sky, casting a golden glow over the small, dusty town. The air was hot and thick, making people move slower than usual. Shops lined the streets, their owners fanning themselves in the unbearable heat. Cars were parked along the roadside, their metal bodies shimmering under the sun's harsh rays. In the midst of this scorching day, Emma, a 10-year-old girl, walked along the sidewalk with careful steps. Her worn-out sandals kicked up small clouds of dust as she moved. Her clothes were old but neatly patched, a sign that someone had once cared for her, though that seemed like a distant memory now. Emma had been on her own for some time, surviving on small errands and the kindness of strangers. Despite her struggles, she never lost the warmth in her heart. She never turned away from someone in need, no matter how little she had. As she wandered past a row of parked cars outside a grocery store, something caught her attention, a faint crying sound. At first, she thought it was just another child nearby, but as she looked around, there was no one. She stopped and listened carefully. The sound was muffled, but it was coming from somewhere close. Emma turned her head and noticed a dark-colored car parked near the entrance. The windows were closed, but inside, a tiny figure moved. Her heart skipped a beat. She stepped closer and peered through the glass. Inside the car, on the back seat, was a small baby. The child was no older than a year, its face flushed red, tears streaming down its cheeks. It was trapped inside, struggling to breathe in the intense heat. Emma gasped. The baby was in danger. She quickly looked around, hoping to find someone. Anyone who could help. The parking lot was mostly empty except for a few people far away, carrying bags of groceries. She ran up to the store entrance, her heart pounding. "Excuse me," she called out to the people coming out of the store. "There's a baby in a car. It's locked inside." Most of them ignored her, too busy with their own concerns. A few glanced in her direction but dismissed her words. "Maybe she's just making it up," one person muttered. "Kids always look for attention," another whispered. Emma felt frustration rise in her chest. How could they not care? How could they not see the danger? She ran back to the car, her mind racing. The baby's cries were weaker now. The heat inside the vehicle must have been unbearable. She didn't have time to wait. Emma pressed her small hands against the window, her fingers leaving sweaty marks on the glass. "It's okay, little one," she whispered. "I'll get you out." Her eyes darted around, searching for something she could use. Then she spotted it. A large brick lay near the sidewalk, likely left behind from some construction work. She hesitated. If she broke the car window, would she get in trouble? But then she looked at the baby's face, red, struggling, helpless. She couldn't waste another second. Grabbing the brick with both hands, Emma took a deep breath and swung it against the car window. The glass cracked but didn't break. The noise startled some passers-by, who now turned to look in curiosity. She lifted the brick again, her arms trembling from fear and determination, and slammed it down once more. This time, the window shattered, sending shards flying everywhere. Ignoring the sting of tiny cuts on her hands, Emma quickly reached inside and unlocked the door. The heavy heat rushed out as she pulled the baby into her arms. The child was burning up. Its little chest rose and fell rapidly, and its tiny fingers clutched weakly at Emma's shirt. "It's okay. I've got you," she whispered, her voice shaking. By now, people had gathered, whispering and pointing at the scene. Some looked impressed, others horrified. A woman screamed, "Did that girl just break into a car?" A man pulled out his phone, likely calling the police. Emma held the baby close, ignoring everything around her. She needed to cool the child down. She looked around desperately and saw a nearby cafe with an outdoor water station. She ran, cradling the baby, and dipped her hand into the cold water, gently dabbing it on the baby's burning skin. The child let out a soft sigh, its tiny body relaxing slightly. But before she could do anything else, Sirens blared in the distance. The police were coming. Emma's heart pounded. What would happen now? She had saved the baby, but would anyone believe her? Or would they think she was a thief trying to steal the child? As the police cars pulled into the parking lot, Emma held the baby tighter, preparing for whatever came next. The desperate rescue. The sound of police sirens grew louder, echoing through the parking lot. People had gathered, whispering among themselves, pointing at the shattered car window and the small girl holding the baby. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She had done the right thing. She had saved the baby. But why did it feel like she was in trouble? She clutched the child tighter, feeling its weak breaths against her chest. The baby was still burning up, its tiny fingers gripping Emma's shirt. She looked down at the small face, flushed, tired, but still alive. That was all that mattered. A police car pulled up, and 2 officers stepped out, their eyes scanning the scene. One of them, a tall man with sharp eyes, walked straight toward her. "Young lady," he said firmly, "put the baby down." Emma's breath caught in her throat. Put the baby down. Did they think she had done something wrong? She shook her head. No, the baby was trapped inside the car. I had to break the window. It was going to. Put the baby down, the officer repeated, stepping closer. Emma's hands trembled, but she didn't move. The baby needed help, not confusion, not questions. Just then, an older woman, Mrs. Thompson, the cafe owner, rushed forward. "Officers, I saw the whole thing," she said, her voice urgent. "This little girl saved that baby's life. The poor thing was locked inside for who knows how long. If she hadn't acted, the child could have." The officers exchanged glances. The second officer, a woman with kind eyes, softened her expression. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" she asked gently. Emma nodded but didn't loosen her grip on the baby. "He needs help," she whispered. The female officer reached out her arms. "Let me take him to the ambulance, okay?" Emma hesitated. Could she trust them? She looked down at the baby's weak little face, then back at the officer. Finally, she nodded and carefully handed the child over. The moment the officer cradled the baby in her arms, she turned to her radio. "We need paramedics now. The child is suffering from extreme heat exposure." A moment later, an ambulance pulled up, its bright red lights flashing. 2 paramedics rushed over, taking the baby from the officer and placing it gently on a stretcher. Emma watched as they checked the baby's pulse, placed an oxygen mask over its tiny face, and wrapped it in a cool, damp cloth. Her chest tightened. Would the baby be okay? She had done everything she could. Now, it was up to them. A misunderstanding. As Emma watched the baby being taken away, a woman came running across the parking lot, her face pale and stricken with panic. It was the baby's mother. She reached the ambulance, her hands shaking. "That's my son. What's happening?" The paramedic turned to her. "Ma'am, your baby suffered from severe heat exposure. He's stable now, but we need to take him to the hospital immediately." Tears welled up in the woman's eyes. She looked inside the ambulance, then turned her gaze toward the broken car window. Her eyes landed on Emma, and her expression changed instantly. "You," she gasped, stepping toward Emma. "You broke my car. You tried to take my baby." Emma's stomach twisted. "What? No. I didn't." Emma stammered. "He was trapped. I was just trying to help." But the woman wasn't listening. "You tried to steal my son," she shouted. The crowd murmured. Some people nodded, others frowned, confused by the sudden accusation. Emma felt cold fear wash over her. She had only wanted to save the baby, but now she was being treated like a criminal. The male officer sighed and turned to Emma. "We need to take you in for questioning." Emma's heart sank. Was this really happening? The truth begins to unfold. As the police car pulled up in front of the station, Emma felt her hands tremble. She had never been inside a police station before. They led her inside and sat her down in a small room. The walls were gray, the air cold. Across from her, the female officer sat down and placed a cup of water in front of her. "Emma," she said softly, "we need to understand what happened." Emma's eyes burned with unshed tears. "I swear, I was just trying to help." The officer nodded. "Tell me everything." And so, Emma told her story. She told them about hearing the baby's cries, about looking for help, and about how no one listened. She described the heat, the fear, the moment she realized the baby wouldn't survive much longer. And finally, she explained breaking the window, pulling the child out, and running to cool him down. The officer listened carefully, never interrupting. When Emma finished, she wiped her eyes. "I know I shouldn't have broken the window," she whispered, "but I didn't know what else to do." The officer sighed. "You did the right thing." Emma's eyes widened. "I did." The officer nodded. "You saved that baby's life." At that moment, the door opened and a doctor walked in. The same doctor treating the baby at the hospital. Emma held her breath. The doctor took a deep breath, then looked at the officers. "I just came from the hospital," he said. "That baby, if he had been in that car for just a few more minutes, he wouldn't have survived." Emma felt like the world had stopped moving. She had saved him. She had truly saved him. The officer turned to Emma with a gentle smile. "You're not in trouble, sweetheart," she said. "You're a hero. Misunderstood hero." Emma sat quietly in the police station, her hands resting on her lap. Her heart still pounded from everything that had happened. Just a few hours ago, she had been walking through town, hungry and tired. Now she was being called a hero, yet she still felt scared. The officer who had questioned her earlier, Officer Jane, sat beside her. "Emma," she said gently, "you did something very brave today." Emma looked up, unsure. "But the baby's mom thought I was stealing him." Jane sighed. She was scared. Sometimes, when people are afraid, they don't see things clearly. At that moment, the door opened, and the baby's mother stepped inside. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. She hesitated before stepping closer to Emma. I wanted to say I'm sorry," the woman said softly. "I was wrong." Emma's eyes widened. The woman took a deep breath. "The doctors told me, if you hadn't acted, my baby wouldn't have survived. I judged you too quickly, and I feel awful about it." She sniffled, then gave a small, shaky smile. "You saved my son's life." Emma's throat tightened. She had never expected to hear those words. The woman knelt in front of her, holding out her hands. "Thank you," she whispered. "Truly, I can never repay you." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. I just did what I had to." Officer Jane smiled. "That's what heroes do." At that moment, the doctor from the hospital entered. He looked at Emma with a warm, proud expression. "The baby is going to be just fine," he announced. "Thanks to you." Relief washed over Emma like a cool breeze. The mother, now overwhelmed with gratitude, turned to the officer. "Is there anything I can do for her?" Jane nodded thoughtfully. "Emma's been living on her own," she explained. "Maybe she needs a second chance at a better life." The mother's face softened. She looked at Emma for a long moment, as if making a decision. Then she smiled. "How would you like to come home with me?" she asked gently. Emma's breath caught. Home. She had never had a real home. She looked into the woman's kind eyes, then at Officer Jane, who gave her an encouraging nod. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt safe. And maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something beautiful. The hospital revelation. Emma stepped hesitantly into the hospital room, her small hands clenched at her sides. The room smelled of antiseptic and clean linen. Machines beeped softly, and the dim lights gave everything a calm glow. In the crib near the hospital bed, the baby she had saved lay peacefully, wrapped in a soft blue blanket. His tiny chest rose and fell steadily, his skin no longer flushed from the heat. He looked so different from the helpless child she had pulled from that car. A lump formed in Emma's throat. He was safe. The baby's mother, standing beside the crib, turned when she heard Emma enter. Her face was filled with emotions, relief, guilt, and gratitude all at once. "I asked the doctor if you could visit," she said softly. "I wanted you to see him, to see that he's okay." Emma nodded, stepping closer. She gently reached out, touching the baby's tiny hand. His fingers curled slightly around hers, warm and full of life. A small smile tugged at her lips. "You saved him, Emma," the mother whispered. "You gave him another chance." At that moment, the doctor entered the room. He was an older man, his face kind but serious. He held a clipboard, and as he walked toward the crib, his eyes welled up with tears. The mother frowned. "Doctor, is something wrong?" The doctor cleared his throat, his voice thick with emotion. "No, nothing is wrong," he said. "In fact, it's quite the opposite." Emma and the mother exchanged confused glances. Taking a deep breath, the doctor continued. "I've been a doctor for over 30 years. I've treated hundreds of children. But today, I witnessed something truly incredible." He looked at Emma. If this baby had been in that car for even 5 more minutes, he wouldn't have survived. Emma felt her heart stop. The mother gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Tears filled her eyes. "You saved his life in the only moment possible," the doctor said, shaking his head. "It was as if you were meant to be there." Emma swallowed hard. She had just followed her heart, done what felt right. But now, hearing these words, she realized just how close it had been. The mother turned to Emma with tearful eyes. "I owe you everything," she whispered. "I don't know how to thank you." Emma, feeling overwhelmed, just smiled softly. "I'm just glad he's okay." The doctor placed a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder. "Not all heroes wear capes," he said warmly. "Some are just brave little girls with kind hearts." Emma didn't know what her future held, but standing in that hospital room, she knew this moment would stay with her forever. A hero's story. The hospital was quiet, except for the soft hum of machines and distant footsteps in the hallway. Emma sat near the baby's crib, watching him sleep peacefully. The little boy, whom she had saved just hours ago, looked warm, safe, and full of life. A small smile formed on her lips. She had never thought of herself as a hero. She was just a poor girl, struggling to survive, doing what felt right. But now, sitting in that room, she realized that her actions had changed a life forever. The doctor and the baby's mother sat nearby, their eyes still filled with emotion. The mother had barely let go of Emma's hand since she arrived. It was as if she couldn't stop thanking her. Suddenly, the hospital door creaked open, and a group of reporters stepped inside, cameras flashing. Emma blinked in surprise. "Are you Emma?" a woman with a microphone asked. Emma hesitated. "Yes." The woman smiled warmly. "The whole town is talking about you. You saved a baby's life. Everyone wants to hear your story." Emma shifted in her seat. She wasn't used to attention. All she had done was what anyone should have done. The mother squeezed her hand. "Emma, people need to know about kindness. Your story can inspire others." Emma looked at the baby, then back at the reporters. She took a deep breath and nodded. She told them everything. How she had heard the baby's cries, how she had tried to get help, and how no one listened. She spoke about her fear, her desperation, and her decision to break the window because she couldn't just stand by and do nothing. The reporters listened with wide eyes. The doctor even wiped away a tear as she spoke. One reporter asked, "Emma, do you have a family?" Emma hesitated. "Not really." A hush fell over the room. The mother, still holding Emma's hand, suddenly spoke. "She does now." Emma's eyes widened. "What?" The mother turned to her with a warm smile. "You saved my son's life, Emma. And if you'll let me, I'd like to give you a home." Emma's breath caught in her throat. A home. A real home. Tears welled up in her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. The cameras flashed as the mother pulled her into a tight hug. And in that moment, Emma realized something. She hadn't just saved a life. She had found a family. The unexpected offer. Emma sat quietly in the hospital room, still trying to understand what had just happened. The mother's words echoed in her mind. "You saved my son's life, Emma, and if you'll let me, I'd like to give you a home." Was this real? Could someone like her, someone who had spent years alone, sleeping under bridges, searching for food, really have a family? She looked up at the mother, who was still holding her hand. The woman's eyes were filled with warmth and sincerity. She wasn't saying this because she felt sorry for Emma. She meant it. Emma swallowed hard. You really want me to stay with you?" The mother nodded. "I do." The doctor standing nearby smiled. "Emma, you have a kind heart. You didn't think about yourself. You only thought about saving that baby. You deserve a home." Emma's hands trembled slightly. She had never dared to hope for something like this. People had always looked past her, ignored her struggles. But now, someone was offering her a chance to belong. Still, doubts crept into her mind. "What if I'm not good enough?" she whispered. The mother squeezed her hand. "You are more than enough, Emma. You're brave, strong, and kind. And my son," she glanced at the baby sleeping peacefully in the crib, "will grow up knowing that his big sister is a hero." Emma's breath caught in her throat. Big sister. She had never had a family before, but now she had someone, a little baby who would look up to her. Tears welled up in her eyes, but this time they weren't from sadness. For the first time in a long time, she felt wanted. The doctor patted her shoulder. "Not all heroes wear capes, Emma. Some just carry a big heart." Emma let out a small, shaky laugh. "I'd like that," she whispered. "I'd like to go home with you." The mother smiled, pulling her into a warm embrace. "Welcome home, sweetheart." And just like that, Emma's life changed forever. She had saved a life, but in the end, she had gained a family. A new beginning. Emma sat in the car, watching the city lights blur past the window. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking about where she would sleep that night or where her next meal would come from. Instead, she was thinking about home, a place she never thought she would have. Beside her, the baby's mother, now her mother too, smiled warmly. The baby slept peacefully in her arms, his tiny chest rising and falling. Emma still couldn't believe it. Just days ago, she had been alone, struggling to survive. Now, she had a family. The car pulled into a quiet neighborhood. The houses were small but warm-looking, with lights glowing from the windows. As they stopped in front of a little white house, Emma felt her heart race. "This is home," her new mother said softly. Emma stepped out of the car, staring at the house in awe. It wasn't grand, but it felt safe, warm, hers. Inside, the living room smelled of fresh bread and lavender. Soft blankets covered the couch, and framed pictures hung on the walls. It felt nothing like the cold streets or the empty shelters Emma had known. Her mother led her to a small bedroom at the end of the hall. The bed was neatly made with soft blue sheets. There was a bookshelf filled with colorful books and a small wooden desk by the window. Emma's eyes widened. This is for me," she whispered. Her mother nodded. "It's all yours." Emma touched the bed, half expecting it to disappear. She had never had a room of her own before. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time, they were happy tears. Her mother knelt beside her and took her hands. "Emma, you saved my son's life, but you also saved me. I was so busy with work, always rushing, always distracted. You reminded me what really matters." Emma swallowed the lump in her throat. "I was just doing what felt right." Her mother smiled. "That's That's what makes you special." At that moment, the baby stirred in his crib, letting out a tiny yawn. Emma walked over and gently placed her hand on his tiny fingers. He curled them around hers, warm and trusting. A soft giggle escaped Emma's lips. "I guess I really am a big sister now." Her mother wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Yes, you are." For the first time in her life, Emma felt safe, loved, and wanted. She wasn't just a girl from the streets anymore. She was part of a family. And for Emma, this was truly a new beginning. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.